The truth is, during World War II, millions of people survived not because of abundance, but because of ingenuity that modern society quietly left behind. While textbooks focus on battles and leaders, they rarely mention the everyday survival systems that kept civilians and soldiers alive when supply chains collapsed. One of the most overlooked of these was a form of preserved meat that could last for months, sometimes even years, without refrigeration. No electricity, no modern packaging, no preservatives as we know them today. And yet, it worked remarkably well. This wasn't just food. It was strategy. It was resilience. It was survival knowledge passed quietly through households, farms, and military units. And for reasons tied to industrialization, convenience culture, and shifting food systems, much of this knowledge faded from public awareness. What's surprising isn't that it existed, it's how effective it was, and how usable it still is today. This guide goes straight into what that meat was, how it worked, and how you can realistically apply the same principles now, whether you're preparing for emergencies or simply want more control over your food. The preserved meat that quietly outlasted refrigeration. The meat in question wasn't a single product, but a category of preservation methods built around drying, curing, and fat sealing. In many parts of Europe, especially under rationing pressure, people relied heavily on cured meats, similar to jerky, salt pork, and a lesser-known but extremely effective method called confit, where meat was cooked slowly in fat and then sealed under that same fat to prevent air exposure. In Britain and across occupied Europe, salt-cured beef and pork were staples. In Eastern Europe and parts of Germany, smoked sausages and heavily dried meats were common. Meanwhile, French households leaned into confit, particularly with duck and goose, storing it in crocks where it could remain edible for months. What made these methods powerful wasn't just preservation, it was stability. These meats didn't require constant monitoring or electricity. Once prepared correctly, they became reliable calorie sources in a time when food uncertainty was, pretty much constant. The reason this meat lasted so long comes down to controlling three key factors: moisture, bacteria, and oxygen. Drying removed moisture, which bacteria need to grow. Salting drew out water and created an environment hostile to microbial life. Smoking added antimicrobial compounds while also further drying the meat. Fat sealing, as used in confit, blocked oxygen entirely, preventing spoilage organisms from thriving. This combination created a hostile environment for decay. In simple terms, the meat wasn't immune to spoiling. It was placed in conditions where spoilage struggled to begin in the first place. What's important here is that these methods were layered. A piece of meat might be salted, then dried, then smoked, or cooked, then sealed in fat, then stored in a cool cellar. Each step reinforced the others. Why this knowledge quietly disappeared from everyday life? After the war, food systems industrialized rapidly. Refrigeration became widespread. Supermarkets replaced local preservation. Convenience overtook necessity. But there's another layer. Governments and institutions shifted focus toward centralized food production and distribution. Teaching individuals how to preserve meat at home became less of a priority. Over time, these skills were seen as outdated, even though they were incredibly effective. There's also a psychological shift. When scarcity fades, so does the urgency to retain survival knowledge. What was once essential became old-fashioned, then eventually forgotten. In practical terms, preparation often started with whatever meat was available: beef, pork, rabbit, even game. The first step was usually heavy salting. Meat would be packed in salt or rubbed thoroughly and left for days to cure. From there, it might be hung in a well-ventilated area to dry. In rural settings, smokehouses were used, where low, steady smoke would preserve the meat over time. For confit, meat was cooked slowly in its own fat until tender, then submerged completely in that fat inside a sealed container. Storage mattered just as much as preparation. Cool, dark environments like cellars were ideal. Temperature fluctuations were minimized, and exposure to air was avoided as much as possible. How you can apply the same methods today without overcomplicating it. Modern life makes this easier, not harder. You don't need a wartime setup, you just need to understand the principles. If you want to start with drying, thin cuts of meat can be salted and air-dried in a controlled environment. A basic dehydrator speeds up the process, but traditional air drying still works if done carefully. For curing, salt remains your primary tool. Even a simple salt cure, followed by refrigeration, can extend shelf life significantly while giving you a safer introduction before attempting full room temperature storage. Fat preservation is surprisingly accessible. Cooking meat slowly in fat and storing it submerged in a sealed container in the fridge can keep it preserved for weeks, sometimes longer. While traditional methods relied on cellars, refrigeration adds an extra layer of safety without changing the core technique. The key is starting small. A single batch teaches more than theory ever will. Real-world examples of how this knowledge becomes useful. If supply chains are disrupted, preserved meat becomes a reliable protein source that doesn't depend on daily shopping. Even short-term issues like power outages become less stressful when part of your food supply doesn't require refrigeration. For outdoor enthusiasts, these methods translate directly into lightweight, long-lasting food that doesn't spoil quickly. Hunters still use variations of these techniques today, often without realizing how closely they mirror wartime practices. Even in everyday life, having preserved meat reduces waste. Instead of rushing to cook fresh meat before it spoils, you extend its usability dramatically. Why this is more relevant now than most people realize. Modern systems are efficient but fragile. They rely on consistency, power, transport, supply chains. WWII era preservation methods were built for inconsistency. That's what makes them valuable today. This isn't about rejecting modern convenience. It's about adding resilience. Knowing how to preserve meat without depending entirely on refrigeration gives you options. And options are what people lacked when systems failed. The knowledge never disappeared completely. It just moved into smaller circles. Traditional communities, homesteaders, and a handful of historians who paid attention to what ordinary people did to survive extraordinary circumstances. If this kind of overlooked history matters to you, and you want more deep dives into the survival techniques that never made it into textbooks, make sure you subscribe and share this with someone who values real, practical knowledge.